Attention Formula One fans. Ferrari has shattered the predictions on the first day of the Australian GP. Are we witnessing the resurgence of the prancing horse? Stay until the end because we analyze everything. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, do you think Ferrari can fight for the championship this year? The first day of the 2025 Australian Grand Prix produced one of the biggest surprises of the season so far. Ferrari, a team that, according to preseason analysis, seemed to be a step behind McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes, performed far better than expected in the free practice sessions. Charles Leclerc was the fastest driver of the day, setting times that left his main rivals speechless. His pace on both medium and soft tires was consistent and competitive, in contrast to the initial prediction that placed Ferrari more than 0.4 of a second behind McLaren per lap in preseason simulations. In the first practice session, Leclerc set a solid pace, but it was in the second session that he truly made the difference. As the teams adjusted their setups and simulated different race conditions, Ferrari maintained its consistency while other teams such as Red Bull and Mercedes struggled to find the ideal balance on the Albert Park circuit. One of the key factors in this unexpected performance was the positive correlation between the data obtained in the simulator and the SF25's response on track. During preseason, the technical team had identified balance issues with the car, especially on high downforce circuits. However, the improvements implemented before the first race appear to have yielded immediate results. At the end of the day, Leclerc emphasized that the car feels much better compared to the Bahrain test, although he made it clear that there is still room for improvement. His statement reinforces the idea that Ferrari has made a step forward in performance, but also suggests that there are still details that need to be refined to maintain this advantage throughout the weekend. On the other hand, the fact that several drivers failed to significantly improve their times when switching from medium to soft tires raises a question mark over the true performance hierarchy. Some teams may have been testing different setups or managing their fuel strategies, meaning Ferrari's advantage may not be definitive. Another point to consider is tire management. Throughout the day, track conditions evolved, and wear became an important factor. Ferrari appears to have found a setup that maximizes performance without compromising degradation, an aspect that could be decisive in qualifying and the race. What is clear is that Ferrari has started the weekend on the right foot, something that has not always been the case in previous seasons. Now the big question is whether they can sustain this level of performance when the teams begin to show their true potential in qualifying and the race. The day left positive impressions, but there are still many unknowns to be resolved. The team remains cautious and avoids triumphant statements, aware that the real battle begins in qualifying. However, the fact that Ferrari outperformed its rivals on the first day of the Australian Grand Prix is an indication that this season could be very different from what many expected. The 2025 Australian Grand Prix marked a historic moment in Formula One with Lewis Hamilton's official debut as a Ferrari driver on a race weekend. After more than a decade at Mercedes, where he built his legacy with multiple championships, Hamilton's arrival at the Scuderia represented one of the most shocking transfers in the history of the sport. However, adapting to a completely new team and a car with radically different characteristics is no small challenge, and the first day at Albert Park made it clear that this process will not be immediate. From the opening laps of free practice, Hamilton faced an SF25 that, in his own words, felt completely different from any other car he had driven in his Formula One career. Unlike the Mercedes concept he was used to, Ferrari opted for a distinct aerodynamic design and a technical approach that requires a particular driving style. This was reflected in the performance gap with his teammate Charles Leclerc, who managed to extract the car's full potential from the start of the weekend. In the first practice session, Hamilton finished more than 0.6 behind Leclerc, demonstrating that he still needs time to familiarize himself with the car and adjust to its demands. In the second session, the gap narrowed slightly to 0.4, indicating a positive learning curve, although there is still considerable room for improvement. Lack of confidence under braking and the car's behavior in fast corners appear to be the areas he needs to work on the most. During post-practice interviews, Hamilton was candid about his on-track feelings. He described his first race weekend experience with Ferrari as both exciting and challenging, emphasizing that the adaptation process is still ongoing. According to his statements, the first session felt complicated, but in the second he was able to make adjustments that allowed him to feel more comfortable with the car. Even so, he made it clear that there is much work to be done before the SF25's potential can be fully exploited. One of the main factors influencing Hamilton's adaptation is the Ferrari's pull rod front suspension, a different setup than the one used by Mercedes and which changes the car's cornering and weight transfer. Adapting to these small details can take time, and while his talent and experience will allow him to speed up that process, the difference with Leclerc shows that he still needs to fine-tune his driving style to match his teammates' performance. Another key aspect in this adjustment process is communication with the engineers. Hamilton is working with a completely new team, which means that both he and the engineers must learn to interpret their feedback and translate it into effective changes to the car's setup. At Mercedes, after so many years, there was a natural synergy between the driver and the technical team, but at Ferrari this process is still developing. The challenge for Hamilton is not only individual, but also strategic for Ferrari. Having two competitive drivers is crucial for the team, especially in a season where the fight for the championship promises to be closer than in previous years. If Hamilton can close the gap to Leclerc quickly, Ferrari will be able to expand its strategic options in the race and maximize its chances of scoring important points. The first day in Australia showed that Hamilton's transition to Ferrari will not be immediate or easy, but it also made clear that his adaptability remains intact. With more time in the car and adjustments to his driving style, the gap to Leclerc is likely to narrow in the coming races. The real challenge will be how long it will take him to reach his peak within the team and whether Ferrari can offer him a car with which he can consistently challenge for wins. The Ferrari SF25 has been one of the great unknowns of the 2025 season, with expectations divided between those who believed the Italian team would continue to be at a disadvantage compared to Red Bull and McLaren, and those who trusted that the improvements implemented during the winter would lead to a leap in quality. The first day of the Australian Grand Prix revealed that Ferrari may be closer to the front of the grid than many expected, and much of this progress is due to the innovations and technical adjustments the team has made to its car. One of the most significant changes to the SF25 is the adoption of a pull rod front suspension, a setup Ferrari hasn't used for over a decade. This change not only alters how the car responds in high-speed corners, but also influences weight distribution and tire management. The decision to modify this key aspect of the car responds to the need to improve stability in fast corners and the car's ability to maintain more consistent performance during races. Another key aspect of the SF25 is its aerodynamic evolution. Ferrari has worked intensively to reduce air resistance without compromising downforce, allowing them to have a more efficient car on the straights without losing speed in corners. During pre-season testing, some analyses indicated that the car still had deficiencies in overall balance, especially on high downforce circuits like Bahrain, but early track testing in Melbourne has shown a better correlation between the data obtained in the simulator and the car's real-life performance. This evaluation between simulation and track performance is one of the most notable points for Ferrari's technical team. In previous seasons, one of the Scuderia's main weaknesses had been the lack of consistency between wind tunnel results and the car's actual performance on the track. With the arrival of former Mercedes engineer Loic Serra, the team has managed to improve the precision of the car's development, allowing them to make more effective adjustments and more accurately predict the impact of each setup change. In addition to aerodynamics and suspension, the SF25 has shown improvements in tire management, an area that has been critical for Ferrari in past seasons. In Australian testing, tire wear was a key factor, and Ferrari appears to have found a better balance in this regard compared to other teams. While it is still early to draw definitive conclusions, the fact that the car maintained a consistent pace throughout the practice sessions suggests progress has been made in optimizing tire wear and temperature. Another key point in the development of the SF25 has been the car's reliability. On the opening day of the Australian Grand Prix, Ferrari completed its program without major mechanical issues, something that hasn't always been a guarantee in previous seasons. The absence of technical problems in the early sessions is a positive sign for the team, which is looking to build a solid season without the setbacks that have cost them important points in the past. Despite the positive aspects, Ferrari has been cautious in its statements, warning that the performance in Melbourne might not be representative of the rest of the season. The Albert Park circuit has unique characteristics that could be favoring the SF25 more than other tracks, and the true measure of the car's potential will be seen when they face circuits with different aerodynamic and traction demands. The technical team led by Fred Vasseur has made it clear that there is still room for improvement and that the upcoming races will be key to assessing whether Ferrari has truly closed the gap with the leading teams. The key to maintaining this level of performance will be the team's ability to continue developing the SF25 throughout the season and respond to any advances its rivals may make. The SF25 demonstrated on the first day of the Australian Grand Prix that Ferrari has made a step forward in several key areas. Improvements to aerodynamics, suspension, and tire management have allowed the team to get off to a competitive start, but the real test will come in the upcoming qualifying and race sessions. Consistent performance and adaptability will be determining factors in confirming whether Ferrari has managed to position itself as a true title contender in the 2025 season. The first day of the 2025 Australian Grand Prix left many more questions than answers. Ferrari surprised with better-than-expected performances, McLaren and Red Bull kept a low profile without showing their full potential, and Mercedes appears to still be in a rebuilding phase. This start to the season has been very different from what many anticipated after pre-season, indicating that the hierarchy on the grid is still far from clear. Charles Leclerc's dominance in the practice sessions was one of the biggest news stories of the day. Ferrari not only demonstrated its pace on the fastest lap, but also demonstrated a better balance between its simulation data and the SF25's on-track performance. However, the big question remains whether they can maintain this level when all the teams maximize their performance in qualifying and the race. Lewis Hamilton's case is another key topic of the weekend. His adaptation to the Ferrari is still ongoing, and although they showed progress between the first and second practice sessions, he is still far from Leclerc's level. The challenge for him will be finding a way to close the gap in qualifying, where every tenth of a second will make a difference on the starting grid. The evolution of his performance throughout the weekend will be a point of interest not only for Ferrari, but for the entire Formula One world, as his arrival at the Italian team represents one of the biggest stories of the season. The situation among rivals leaves many questions unanswered. McLaren, which finished 2024 as the strongest team, has had a more modest start than expected. Red Bull, led by Max Verstappen, has yet to show clear signs of regaining the dominance of previous years, and Mercedes continues to struggle to find an optimal balance in its car. One of the factors that will determine how the weekend unfolds will be tire management. Temperatures in Melbourne were higher than expected and could play a crucial role in qualifying and the race. The teams that best adapt their strategies to these conditions will have the best chance of fighting for the top spots. As we move toward qualifying, the big question is whether Ferrari can turn this promising start into concrete results. A good performance in practice is important, but what will really make the difference will be their ability to maintain speed when the competition is at its peak. If Ferrari can confirm their speed in qualifying, they could be in a position to fight for victory in Australia and completely change expectations for the 2025 season. However, if their rivals have been hiding their true performance, we could see a completely different scenario when all the teams show their true potential. This first day of activity was just the beginning of what promises to be a weekend full of surprises. Qualifying will determine the starting positions, but the real battle will be fought in the race, where pace management, strategy, and reliability will play a decisive role. The upcoming sessions in Melbourne will provide more clues about the true grid order and set the tone for the rest of the season. The 2025 championship is just getting started, but if one thing has been clear on this first day, it's that the fight for the title is more open than ever.